That military code was buried 15 years ago. So why did I just hear it tonight? The crystal chandeliers cast rivers of gold across the ballroom as laughter drifted through the air and glasses clinked beneath a ceiling that seemed high enough to touch the clouds. It was one of the most exclusive charity galas in Manhattan. A room filled with executives, investors, politicians, and people who carried influence as naturally as they carried their names. At the center of it all stood Ethan Caldwell. The billionaire entrepreneur was preparing to announce a partnership worth billions of dollars. A deal that reporters had been speculating about for months. Cameras followed him. Conversations paused when he walked by. Tonight belonged to him. But Ethan never noticed the woman moving quietly between the tables. Few people did. Maya Brooks carried a silver tray through the crowd with practiced grace, her black uniform blending into the background of luxury and power. At 29, she had mastered the art of being invisible. Her smile was polite. Her voice was soft. Her eyes stayed focused on the work in front of her. To the guests, she was simply another waitress. Another face they would forget before the night ended. Maya preferred it that way. The evening moved smoothly. Waiters crossed the ballroom. Soft piano music floated from a stage near the far wall. Guests exchanged business cards and promises. Then everything changed. It happened in less than a second. A distinguished older man passed near Maya while speaking quietly to another guest. His words were calm, ordinary, almost impossible to notice. Almost. The moment Maya heard the phrase, her entire body went still. The tray in her hands tilted. A champagne glass slipped. The sharp sound of crystal striking the marble floor echoed through the room. Several guests turned. Conversations paused. A nearby server stared at her in surprise. Maya never made mistakes, but Maya barely noticed them. Her attention was locked on the older man disappearing into the crowd. Her heartbeat quickened. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the tray, because she knew those words. Not the language itself. The pattern. The sequence. The code hidden beneath it. A military code. One that had supposedly vanished 15 years ago. One that should never have appeared inside a Manhattan ballroom filled with billionaires. Across the room, Ethan Caldwell continued smiling for photographers, completely unaware. Maya watched him from a distance. For the first time that night, fear touched her eyes. Not fear for herself. Fear for what that forgotten code might mean. And suddenly, the gala no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like the beginning of something no one else could see. Maya forced herself to breathe normally. Around her, the gala resumed as if nothing had happened. Guests returned to their conversations. Waiters collected the broken glass. The pianist continued playing a gentle melody that drifted across the ballroom like a calm river. But for Maya, the room had changed. Every face suddenly mattered. Every voice carried weight. She handed her tray to another server and quietly stepped toward the edge of the ballroom. From there, she could observe without attracting attention. The older man who had spoken the coded phrase was now standing beside a group of investors near the east windows. He appeared completely ordinary. Gray hair, expensive suit, relaxed smile. Nothing about him suggested danger. That was what troubled her most. Maya had learned long ago that important things rarely announce themselves. The people who caused the biggest problems were often the ones nobody noticed. She watched him exchange a few words with another guest. Then she saw something else. A brief nod. A subtle glance. Tiny details that would mean nothing to most people. Yet her instincts would not let them go. A young waitress approached her carrying a tray of sparkling water. "You okay?" the woman asked quietly. "You never drop anything." Maya offered a small smile. "Just distracted." The answer sounded convincing enough. It always did. For years, Maya had become an expert at hiding what she felt. She had hidden fear. She had hidden grief. She had hidden memories she never wanted to revisit. Tonight, those memories were pushing their way back to the surface. Across the ballroom, applause suddenly erupted. Maya turned toward the stage. Ethan Caldwell had stepped to the microphone. Tall, confident, perfectly composed. The billionaire's voice carried easily through the room. He thanked donors. He praised business leaders. He spoke about innovation, opportunity, and the future. The crowd listened carefully. Some smiled. Others recorded the moment on their phones. Ethan looked completely at ease. Maya studied him for several seconds. He had no idea what she had heard. No idea that a forgotten sequence of words had transformed the entire evening. To him, this was simply another successful event. Another milestone in a career filled with victories. A server passing nearby accidentally brushed Maya's shoulder. She barely noticed. Her attention had shifted again. Another guest had entered the ballroom through a side entrance. The newcomer paused for only a moment before scanning the room. His gaze moved quickly, methodically, then it settled near the stage. A strange feeling tightened in Maya's chest. She could not explain it. Not yet, but the pattern was growing clearer. One unusual phrase could be dismissed. Two unusual observations could be coincidence. Three began to form a picture, and Maya was starting to see pieces connecting. She moved toward a refreshment station and picked up a silver pitcher, maintaining the appearance of working while she continued watching the room. No one paid attention to her. That was the advantage of being invisible. People revealed themselves when they believed nobody was looking. The lights above reflected softly against polished marble floors. Laughter echoed near the bar. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Everything looked beautiful, peaceful, safe. Yet beneath that polished surface, Maya sensed something else moving quietly through the room. Something hidden, something deliberate. As Ethan continued speaking to the crowd, Maya kept her eyes on the guests instead, because for the first time that evening, she was no longer serving drinks. She was searching for answers. Maya remained near the refreshment station, moving just enough to avoid drawing attention. The silver pitcher in her hand had become a disguise more than a tool. Guests saw a waitress. Nothing more. That was exactly what she wanted. Ethan Caldwell finished his speech to enthusiastic applause. The billionaire stepped away from the microphone and immediately became surrounded by investors, reporters, and business partners eager to speak with him. Smiles appeared. Hands were shaken. Photographs were taken. From a distance, it looked like another perfect night in the life of a man who seemed to have everything under control. Maya knew better, not because she knew Ethan personally. In truth, she had never exchanged more than a few words with him, but she recognized a dangerous pattern when she saw one. The problem was that nobody else could see it yet. Her eyes moved across the ballroom again. The older man near the windows was gone. The newcomer who had entered through the side door had also disappeared into the crowd. Yet something remained. A rhythm. Small interactions happening at precise moments. Brief conversations that lasted only seconds. People changing positions throughout the room without appearing connected. To most guests, it was meaningless. To Maya, it felt organized. She quietly crossed the ballroom carrying a tray of water glasses. As she passed a group of executives, she heard another phrase. Her heartbeat skipped. The words themselves sounded harmless. Ordinary business language. But hidden beneath them was a familiar structure. Another coded layer. Maya almost stopped walking. Almost. Instead, she kept moving. Years ago, someone had taught her an important lesson. The moment people realized you were listening was the moment they stopped revealing the truth. She reached a service corridor near the ballroom entrance and paused. The noise of the gala softened behind her. For a few seconds, she stood completely still. Memories she had spent years burying began rising to the surface. Long nights studying communication systems. Endless pages of encrypted patterns. Instructors repeating the same warning again and again. Codes were not dangerous because of what they said. They were dangerous because of what they triggered. Maya closed her eyes briefly. 15 years. That code should have disappeared. 15 years ago. Yet tonight she had heard it twice. Maybe 3 times. No, definitely 3. When she opened her eyes, a voice startled her. "Excuse me." Maya turned. One of Ethan's event coordinators stood nearby holding a clipboard. "We are running low on sparkling water near the investor tables." Maya nodded immediately. "I will take care of it." The woman smiled and walked away. Maya returned to the ballroom carrying fresh bottles. As she approached the investor section, she noticed Ethan standing with several international guests. His expression was relaxed, confident. He was discussing future expansion plans and upcoming partnerships. Everything about his posture suggested a man focused on opportunity, not risk. Maya slowed her pace. Then she saw it. A man near the back of the group adjusted his cufflink and briefly touched 2 fingers against the edge of his glass. The gesture lasted less than a second. Most people would never notice it. Maya did, because it matched another signal embedded within the same communication system she had recognized earlier. Her grip tightened around the tray. The pieces were connecting faster now. The code, the positioning, the signals. None of it felt random anymore. For the first time that evening, Maya became certain of one thing. Ethan Caldwell was not simply attending the center of the event. Somehow, without realizing it, he had become the center of something else entirely. Maya stood motionless for a moment, watching the man lower his hand after the subtle signal. Nobody around him reacted. The conversation continued. A few guests laughed. Someone raised a glass in celebration. The moment disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Yet Maya could not ignore it. 3 separate indicators. 3 separate confirmations. The probability of coincidence had become almost impossible to believe. She carefully set her tray onto a nearby service table and looked toward Ethan again. He was smiling as one of the investors described a future project overseas. His attention remained completely fixed on business. Maya felt a quiet frustration rising inside her. Not because Ethan had done anything wrong, because he was exactly where people expected him to be. Visible, predictable, easy to find, easy to follow, easy to monitor. The realization settled heavily in her mind. Whatever was happening tonight seemed to revolve around him. A server hurried past carrying a tray of appetizers. Maya stepped aside and nearly collided with another employee. "Sorry," the young man said quickly. Maya nodded and continued walking. She needed information. More importantly, she needed certainty before she did something that would sound completely irrational. She moved through the ballroom with purpose, refilling glasses and collecting empty plates while quietly observing. Every few minutes she noticed another detail. A guest checking a watch immediately after receiving a text. A brief exchange of eye contact between strangers standing on opposite sides of the room. Small adjustments in position. Tiny movements. Nothing dramatic. Nothing alarming. Yet together they formed a pattern she could feel more than explain. Near the back of the ballroom, Maya stopped beside a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Thousands of lights stretched into the distance. Cars moved below like streams of red and white stars. Normally she loved this view. Tonight she barely saw it. Her reflection stared back from the glass. Calm face, focused eyes. But behind that reflection lived a version of herself she had spent years trying to leave behind. A version trained to notice what others missed. A version that understood how information traveled without being spoken aloud. Maya closed her eyes for a second. She remembered promising herself she would never return to that world. Never again. Then a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Everything all right?" Maya turned. One of the event security supervisors stood nearby. He was a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit with an earpiece tucked behind one ear. His name tag read Carter. Maya hesitated. This was her chance. The logical thing to do was tell someone. Yet how could she explain it? Forgotten code. Subtle signals. Instincts built from a past she could never fully describe. Carter followed her gaze toward the ballroom. "You look concerned." Maya considered her words carefully. "Have there been any unusual guests tonight?" Carter smiled politely. "At an event full of billionaires? Every guest is unusual." He laughed softly at his own joke. Maya did not. The supervisor noticed. His smile faded slightly. "Why do you ask?" Maya looked toward Ethan again, then back at Carter. For a brief moment she almost told him everything. Almost. But she stopped herself. because she had seen that expression before. The expression people made when something sounded impossible. The expression people wore right before dismissing a warning. "Forget it," Maya said quietly. "Probably nothing." Carter nodded and walked away. Maya watched him disappear into the crowd. Then she turned back toward the ballroom. Her stomach tightened, because deep down she knew it was not nothing. And every passing minute seemed to make that feeling stronger. Maya tried to return to work. She really did. She picked up empty glasses. She carried fresh bottles to the investor tables. She smiled when guests thanked her. From the outside, she looked exactly like every other server moving through the ballroom. Inside, however, her thoughts were racing. The pattern was no longer fading. It was becoming sharper. Every observation seemed to reinforce the last. She reached a table near the center of the room and began replacing water glasses. As she worked, a voice drifted from behind her. "Mr. Caldwell is moving to the private lounge in 20 minutes. Maya froze for a fraction of a second. The sentence sounded harmless, a normal piece of event information, yet the timing felt wrong. She glanced toward the speakers without turning her head. Two men stood near a decorative column. One nodded. The other adjusted his tie and walked away. Nothing unusual. Nothing that security would question. But Maya's instincts refused to let it go. Across the room, Ethan continued greeting guests. Reporters were beginning to gather near the stage for a scheduled interview. Investors waited for private conversations. Everyone wanted a moment of his attention. Everyone wanted something from him. Maya watched him carefully. Then she noticed something new. Ethan's schedule had become predictable. Every movement was being announced before it happened. Every destination was known in advance. Every appearance followed a public timeline. The realization unsettled her. Predictability created opportunity. And opportunity was exactly what worried her. A few minutes later, Maya found herself standing near one of the service stations behind the ballroom. She stared at a row of polished glasses while debating with herself. If she remained silent and nothing happened, she would feel foolish for worrying. If she remained silent and her instincts were correct, she would never forgive herself. The choice seemed simple, yet experience had taught her that warnings were rarely welcomed, especially when they came from people nobody expected to have valuable information. A senior server approached carrying a clipboard. "Maya, could you bring these guest lists to the hospitality desk?" Maya accepted the papers automatically. As she glanced down, one name immediately caught her attention. The older man she had been watching. Beneath his name was the company he represented. Maya frowned. Something felt wrong. She looked again. Then a third time. The company existed. She recognized it. But according to the information she remembered, that executive should have retired years ago. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe not. Her pulse quickened. Tiny inconsistencies were often the most important clues. Maya handed the clipboard back and looked toward Ethan once more. This time she made a decision. Waiting was no longer an option. She crossed the ballroom. Guests moved around her in flowing evening attire. Music filled the air. Laughter echoed beneath the chandeliers. Yet with every step, Maya felt more certain. Ethan was standing near a display of donor awards when she finally reached him. Several investors surrounded him. One reporter held a microphone. Another adjusted a camera. Maya stopped a few feet away. For a moment she hesitated. Then she spoke. "Mr. Caldwell." Ethan turned briefly. His expression showed polite impatience. The expression of a man interrupted during an important conversation. "Yes." Maya swallowed carefully. Every instinct told her this would sound unbelievable, but she said it anyway. "I think something unusual is happening tonight." For a second, Ethan simply stared at her. Then one of the investors chuckled softly. Another looked confused. Ethan's attention shifted back toward the reporter. "I appreciate your concern," he said politely, "but I think everything is under control." Maya felt her stomach sink, because she had seen that reaction before, and she knew this conversation was far from over. Maya remained standing beside the donor display for a moment after Ethan turned away. The conversation around him immediately resumed. Reporters asked questions. Investors laughed politely. Camera flashes reflected off polished glass and silver decorations. It was as if her warning had never happened. She should have expected that. A billionaire surrounded by executives was unlikely to place much weight on the concerns of a waitress. Still, disappointment lingered. Not because Ethan had dismissed her, because time was slipping away. Maya quietly stepped back into the crowd. Her mind replayed every detail she had observed throughout the evening. The coded phrase, the unusual signals, the inconsistencies in the guest list. None of them proved anything on their own. Yet together they formed a picture she could not ignore. 20 minutes later, the event shifted into its next phase. Guests began moving toward smaller reception areas reserved for private discussions. Staff members directed attendees through elegant hallways lined with artwork and soft lighting. Maya immediately noticed something important. Ethan's schedule was unfolding exactly as she had overheard earlier. The private lounge, the selected guests, the timing, everything matched. Her concern deepened. She moved through a service corridor and entered the reception area from a side entrance. The room felt smaller than the ballroom but even more exclusive. Large windows overlooked the city. Leather chairs surrounded polished tables. Conversations became quieter here, more strategic, more valuable. Maya carried a tray of coffee and sparkling water between groups of guests. As she approached one table, a familiar voice reached her ears. She did not recognize the speaker at first. Then she saw him, the older man from earlier. He was speaking softly with another guest. Maya slowed her pace without appearing obvious. The words sounded ordinary. Financial forecasts, travel plans, investment opportunities. Then one sentence changed everything. It lasted less than 5 seconds. Most people would never notice it. Maya almost stopped breathing. Hidden inside the conversation was another fragment. Another layer of the same communication structure she had been tracking all evening. Her pulse quickened. This was no longer instinct. It was confirmation. The system was active. The code was real. More importantly, it was being used by multiple people inside the event. Maya set down a coffee cup and forced herself to remain calm. Panic would help no one. Observation mattered more. Across the room, Ethan was meeting privately with several international investors. Security personnel stood nearby. Everything appeared normal. Yet Maya noticed something she had not seen before. One of the investors excused himself from the group and crossed the room. As he passed another guest, they exchanged a brief glance. No words. No handshake. Just a look. Seconds later, a third person checked a phone and quietly changed positions. Maya felt a chill travel through her chest. The pattern was accelerating, like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. She needed someone to listen, someone with authority. Her eyes found Carter, the security supervisor, near the entrance. This time she did not hesitate. She walked directly toward him. "I need you to hear me," she said quietly. Carter studied her expression. Whatever he saw made him stop smiling. "What is it?" Maya glanced around to ensure nobody was listening. Then she spoke carefully. "The people I told you about earlier are coordinating something. I cannot explain everything yet, but I know the signals I am seeing are connected." Carter frowned. Signals? Maya nodded. Patterns. Communication. Hidden inside normal conversations. The supervisor looked skeptical. Not dismissive, just uncertain. Before he could answer, his radio crackled softly. A brief message came through. Carter listened. His expression changed. Only slightly, but Maya noticed. "What happened?" she asked. Carter lowered the radio. "Probably nothing." Then he paused. "But one of our guest credentials just triggered a verification issue." Maya felt her heartbeat quicken again, because for the first time that night, reality had begun catching up with her warning. Carter stared at Maya for a long moment. The noise of the reception lounge seemed to fade into the background. Nearby, Guests continued discussing investments and future partnerships. Glasses clinked softly. Waiters moved between tables. Yet the atmosphere felt different now. Tighter. More fragile. "What kind of verification issue?" Maya asked quietly. Carter glanced at his radio. "One guest credential does not match the registration database." He lowered his voice. "It could be a clerical error." Maya nodded slowly, but neither of them seemed convinced. Across the room, Ethan remained engaged in conversation with several investors. He looked completely relaxed, confident, unaware. Carter followed Maya's gaze. "You really believe he is connected to whatever you think is happening?" Maya answered immediately.
No.
Carter looked surprised. "Then why are you so focused on him?" Maya's eyes never left Ethan. "Because everything else is." The security supervisor said nothing. For the first time that evening, he appeared to be taking her seriously. Another message crackled through his radio. Carter listened carefully. His expression grew more concerned. "What is it?" Maya asked. "The credential belongs to a guest who should not be here." Maya felt a chill run through her chest. Meaning the real attendee checked into a hotel in Chicago this morning. Carter folded his arms. "Someone is using his identity." Neither spoke for several seconds. The answer itself was troubling. But for Maya, it confirmed something even bigger. The hidden pattern was real. Suddenly, movement near the far side of the room caught her attention. One of the men she had been observing earlier stood and quietly exited through a side hallway. A few seconds later, another guest followed. Not together. Not obviously connected. Yet Maya noticed the timing, the spacing, the deliberate distance between them. She looked toward Carter. "There." Carter followed her gaze. "What about them?" "Watch where they go." Carter hesitated only briefly before speaking into his radio. Two security staff members discreetly moved toward the hallway entrance. Maya continued watching. Her heartbeat seemed louder now. Faster. Something was building. She could feel it. Not danger in the dramatic sense. Something else. A plan reaching its final stage. Nearby, Ethan finished one conversation and began another. A reporter approached with additional questions. An assistant handed him a folder. Everything around him continued according to schedule. That bothered Maya more than anything, because the most successful plans often depended on people following predictable routines. Then it happened. A small detail, almost invisible. One of the investors near Ethan glanced toward the hallway. Less than a second later, another guest checked his watch. Maya's eyes widened. She had seen that sequence before. Years ago. Long before she became a waitress. Long before she disappeared from a world she never wanted to revisit. The memory struck her with startling clarity. A chain of confirmations. Silent acknowledgments passed between people who never needed to speak directly. Her stomach tightened. The code was not just active. It was coordinating movement. Carter noticed the change in her expression. "What is it?" Maya answered without looking at him. "They are synchronizing." The security supervisor frowned. Synchronizing for what? Maya did not know. Not yet. But she knew enough. The pieces were finally connecting. The code, the false identity, the signals, the positioning. All of it pointed toward one conclusion. Whatever had started 15 years ago was not truly gone. It had simply gone quiet. And tonight, in a room filled with powerful people who believed they controlled everything, it had quietly come back to life. For several seconds, neither Maya nor Carter spoke. The reception lounge continued moving around them as if nothing had changed. Conversations flowed. Glasses clinked softly. The skyline shimmered beyond the windows. Yet Maya could feel the invisible tension tightening around the room. Carter immediately raised his radio and issued a quiet instruction. Additional security personnel began repositioning themselves throughout the reception area. They moved carefully, trying not to alarm guests. Maya watched their faces. Most had no idea why they were moving. They only knew something felt wrong. Across the room, Ethan finally noticed the change. His conversation slowed. His eyes followed one of the security officers crossing the floor. A faint crease appeared between his brows. It was the first sign that he sensed something unusual. Then another development unfolded. One of the guests' security had been monitoring abruptly excused himself and headed toward the exit corridor. A second individual did the same less than a minute later. Not hurried, not nervous, calm, deliberate. Maya's stomach tightened. The sequence was ending. Whatever purpose had brought those people together seemed to be complete. Carter received another update through his radio. This time his expression changed completely. "What happened?" Maya asked. He looked at her. "The identification records." He paused. "3 more guests have inconsistencies." Maya slowly closed her eyes. 3 more. That was no accident. Carter followed her gaze toward Ethan. "You were right." The words were quiet, almost reluctant, yet they carried weight. For the first time that evening, someone with authority believed her. Ethan noticed the exchange and walked toward them. His confident expression had been replaced by curiosity. "What exactly is going on?" he asked. Carter glanced at Maya before answering. The hesitation did not escape Ethan. The billionaire looked directly at her. Really looked at her for the first time all night. Not as a waitress, not as staff, as a person. "You have known something from the beginning, have you not?" Maya held his gaze. "I recognized a communication system that should not exist anymore." Ethan frowned. "A communication system?" Maya nodded. "Hidden signals, coordinated movements, people exchanging information without attracting attention." Ethan stared at her for several seconds. The room suddenly felt very quiet. "How would a waitress know that?" he asked softly. Maya did not answer. She did not need to. Carter's expression already revealed the truth. Ethan noticed it immediately. The billionaire looked back at Maya, and something shifted behind his eyes. The skepticism disappeared. In its place came something else. Respect, confusion, disbelief. Because for the first time that night, he realized the woman nobody had noticed was seeing things that trained professionals had completely missed.